Hey, welcome back to another episode of State of the Art. I hope you're all having a good quarantine time at home. If you're hearing this during the coronavirus outbreak, that's what I'm doing. So hopefully every week we're going to bring you another artist that you can listen to in your off time. Feel free to send us some questions at State of the Art on Instagram or Twitter, or Gabe at thestateoftheart.org if you want to email me directly. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode with Heidi Lee. If you haven't heard that yet, go back and listen to it. Super interesting artist who makes hats. So we get into how to design these amazing 3D printed hats that are shown all over the world and worn by celebrities like Jennifer Lopez and all sorts of other people. This week, let's see here. I've been sitting at home for a while now, about 3 weeks now total. Trying to stay active and engaged with my own work, although it's hard to make things during this time, I've found. I don't know if that's been hard for you as well. But we're going to speak to an artist this week who's in Turkey currently. It's Can Buyukberber. Maybe you've seen his work before. He creates sort of giant-scale immersive audiovisual experiences in geodesic domes, in virtual reality. He creates sculptures that really can't even be created in our world. We've done a couple shows together in the past, and he's a really great guy, and I was really excited to talk to him this week. So without further ado, Can, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Gabe.
So how are you doing? Where are you right now?
I'm right now in Turkey. It's a city called Izmir. It's my hometown. I've been visiting my family, and I'm kind of stuck here right now at home.
Yeah, how is the quarantine going in Turkey?
I mean, it's pretty serious, like the rest of the world. The same stuff is happening here as well. All I know is the numbers are lower than, other European countries like Spain or Italy. So I think we've been handling it well, but we are also cautious, just staying in houses. I heard the international flights are now totally canceled, and also traveling in between cities is also it's limited right now. So we are all staying in houses.
Right. Yeah. Trying to keep everybody safe.
Yeah. Thank you. How are you in New York?
It's all right in New York. That New York is sort of the epicenter in the United States for what's going on here. And so we're all trying to stay inside as much as possible, and hopefully our listeners are too. It's New York, so the people are still on their balconies shouting things and clapping every night, and we're trying to get through this. I think hopefully we'll bring the world a little closer together by the end of it. Yep. Are you at home thinking about new projects, or are you finding it hard to think about that during this time period?
I had a few new ideas, in my head I've been thinking about, but it seems like I became quite lazy these last few weeks. So I feel like it's a better time to learn new stuff and, just take some time off. I've been playing more games lately that I didn't have a chance to play games almost in the last 10 years.
What are you playing? Anything really good?
I'm currently playing this new Half-Life VR game, Alex. It's really cool. I guess it's one of the best virtual reality games so far. So I've been having really fun with that.
And you make VR. So maybe we could back up now and talk about sort of what led you to the world of immersive art. And is that how you describe your work, as immersive art, or is there a different term that you use?
Yeah. I call myself a visual artist. So I do all sorts of different work, but most of my work, they are audiovisual experiences, and they use somehow space and immersion. So I think it's fair to say they're immersive art.
And how do you define immersion in your work?
Immersion, it's a great question. So I feel like immersion and experience, they're two important keywords for my work. So I've been working with spaces and architectural spaces. So it allowed me to create a more spatial work. So in a way, I'm able to put audiences in different spaces. So in its core, it becomes an immersive experience because audiences can travel in either VR environments or geodesic dome environments or rooms with the help of digital technologies like projectors or headsets. So, as a big movie fan, it just allowed me to create experiences where the audiences can travel to those spaces, but not just see them on screens, basically.
So the idea, like the goal for you is sort of to be able to walk into a movie, be like a
Exactly,
character in
exactly.
that movie.
Yeah, exactly.
And was there a specific moment that sort of led you to creating this sort of work? Like, were you watching a film and thought, "Oh, I want to be able to be a character in that film," or was it
Um,
more of seeing another artwork?
yeah, definitely it was a progression and experimenting with different media. So I guess the first thing that allowed me to create those sorts of experiences was use of projection mapping techniques. So that was the first time I was able to create a work outside of screen, because most of my work is digital. And when I first created, it was in undergrad studies. We were in a workshop in Cologne in Germany. So they asked us to create a installation or artwork, basically, and we were thinking about what we can do. And that was my first time I thought about, okay, let's try this projection mapping stuff. And it was a very, lo-fi work, but that was the first time I did that. And then it progressively became more architectural work, and then domes, and then VR. So it was a progression since maybe 2010.
And how do you start thinking about a new work? Do you start with the digital content, like for a projection mapping piece? Do you think about the space first, or do you think about the content? And how do those two go together for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, chronologically, if I think about that, there were some times that I was focusing on my personal work. There were times I received, commissioned artwork for different spaces. There were more commercial projects. I worked as an art director. So there was always these kind of overlaps and intersections between personal work, commissioned artworks, and commercial work. So there definitely was a progression in terms of how to formalize my pipeline, basically creative pipeline for these sort of projects. But probably the first projects that I always do with a new kind of media, for instance, like VR, that's always a personal work, and it's always a first technical exploration, understanding the media, how we can create new experiences, new artworks using this new media. So understanding how to work with that, or how to transfer some of my either existing assets from different projects, or aesthetics, or experiential techniques that I use. So understanding that media comes first, so that I can tailor an experience that uses the advantages and strong points of that new media, but not just transfer an existing artwork to that. That always inspires me, because there's always a new approach I can explore. I can find with a new media, and then I generally have a philosophical idea or concept that intrigues me in that specific time in my life, and that somehow conceptually reflects itself. And then there's this aesthetic exploration and building basically an experience by combining all this media exploration, conceptual exploration, and also aesthetic exploration.
How do you describe your aesthetic choices in your work? Because it's a very clearly defined aesthetic, but I'm not even sure how to categorize it myself.
Thank you. So let's think about it together, okay? Um, I I have different inspirations. So I studied design and science and art. I have a background. I'm a physics dropout, and then I studied visual communication design, and then I did my grad studies in art and technology. So each different discipline inspired me to create my own aesthetics. So there is a strong design influence in that sense. I love grids and simple shapes, basic design, minimalist color palettes or forms. And then there is this scientific inspiration that I think comes from physics, like scientific schemas or particle physics and how we visualize scientific theories, basically. So that informs me as well. And then I like parametric architecture and organic forms and complex visualizations as well. So I guess when you put all these different influences and disciplines all together, I somehow developed my own aesthetics. But there is also a big emphasis in a sculptural approach to form making, and also using light and space as well.
Yeah, maybe we can talk about a specific sculptural piece you've done. Like I'm thinking Morphogenesis, because this is one of the dome pieces, right?
Yes.
And what is it like working with a giant dome? How do you go about creating a piece for that? Can you describe how this piece looks? Sort of like if we were to walk into the dome, what would we feel and see?
Yeah. I mean, working with domes is amazing. It's really inspiring for me. Um, I think first time I experienced a dome piece was in 2012 in Montreal, Canada, and they have this beautiful space called SAT, Society for Art and Technology, and they have this huge permanent dome installation. They showcase works, artistic and experimental works that is specifically created for those kind of settings. So when I first saw that space, I was super inspired because when you lay down in a dome, it covers your whole peripheral vision. So it is the most efficient way, I think, to create an immersive experience, because you lose yourself in that media basically. So there are no frames in a way, which is also very similar to virtual reality. But the good thing about this is it's a communal experience, so everybody experiences the same thing. So the feeling of immersion is very strong, and when you specifically create your content for that kind of media, which is either a spherical rendering technique or an equirectangular 360 rendering technique, it somehow creates that illusion of perspective. So, for instance, if you're looking to a tall building, it really looks like a tall building. It just um, encompasses of that dome surface, but it becomes like a real vision experience. So it was technically very inspiring, and that was the time when I started my grad studies in San Francisco at SFAI, and I had this idea of creating a dome experience after seeing that space. So when I was exploring how can I create, content for this media, and I also at the same time explored, hey, this looks very similar to content creation for virtual reality as well. So that came in hand to hand. Um, at the same time, I was creating my first VR experience with that as well. So I had this prior experience in architectural projection mapping pieces. Those were the kind of experiences I was creating at that time. This is like 2015 or 14. So I already had this, in a way, developed aesthetic approach to creating audiovisual experiences, and I somehow tried to transfer that aesthetics into the VR space. So it just started as um, aesthetic explorations, like I said, but the challenge was, how can I create sort of the similar aesthetics for a 360 space? And then it just changes the whole deal, because now I need to create spaces, not just visuals for 2D screens or projection surfaces. So each scene, each part in that VR experience became a world building process. So each scene was a different space or form. The cool thing was in VR, when I create these forms, I'm able to put my camera in those forms, so the sculptural form becomes a space that is surrounding you. So that was an interesting thing to explore. Then I built these different spaces, and I created this um, fly through between these different spaces and supported it with different, emotional soundscapes.
Hmm.
So juxtaposition of those different spaces and traveling through those different, sounds and visual spaces became the basis for the morphogenesis experience.
So you start with creating these digital spaces, and then you place virtual cameras inside of them, and then these spaces are sort of flown through. So when we're lying in the middle of this dome, we can kind of embody these different spaces that don't exist. These are all digital recreations, or creations, I should say.
Exactly.
And what is the title Morphogenesis about? Like, where did that come from?
So that was a concept that I was really interested in while doing that project. So in general, I'm very fascinated by immersion systems and how um, both like social on a social scale or on a city scale or in an organism scale, how things form formations by themselves in a self-organized way. So I was interested in that concept, and then I was just reading about it, and I saw this uh, word morphogenesis, which literally means in Greek the beginning of the shape, and it describes this process in organisms, how they develop their forms by certain geometrical patterns. So it seemed like a perfect fit to describe such a project that uses geometry and self inspiration from self-organized systems. And I was specifically also interested in organic shapes. So I started with that idea, beginning of the shape, and I formed my own spaces and organic forms, and that became this umbrella concept that combine all these different elements of the project.
It's fascinating. Was there a specific shape from the natural world that you would use in the piece, in the digital content?
No, it was all synthetic, basically explorations. But I was more interested in, maybe how um, how a human form would shape, how an embryo would shape, starting with single cell, then divisions and two cells, four cell, and all that process. So I feel like in that there's this maybe beginning with more celestial formations, like how Big Bang started everything, and then we formed all these different physical structures. Then came the organic forms and human embryo, and how we develop our own full body. And maybe the next steps in that project was how we can transcend beyond this three-dimensional space.
Hmm. I think we're definitely going to post some photos of morphogenesis on our social media, so you can check it out there too. And I'm kind of curious, why do you think there's such a trend towards immersive spaces right now in our society? I guess it seems like there's more and more pop up art shows and domes and all sorts of venues for immersion. Do you think there's a reason for this trend?
Um, I think we are very visual oriented creatures. So that's a field right now that's a lot of innovation is happening, and cinema is one of the major art forms for more than a century now. And we love movies, we love audiovisual experiences, and I think that immersive evolution was happening first with cinema, and we had a surround sound and bigger screens and IMAX and 3D glasses, and I feel like the next step of that evolution is happening now in the immersive art scene. where it was actually predicted long time ago in 60s, with for instance, media theorist Gene Youngblood has a book called Expanded Cinema, and he has been basically describing the age we're living in right now with holographic displays, how this new expanded cinematic experiences are going to use abstract audiovisual experiences for a new way of storytelling and experiences. So right now, there is a lot of innovation with media and different softwares and technologies for artists like us to just experiment with these new tools to create different new ways of storytelling and experiences. And I feel like people still, although there's all these streaming platforms right now, people still love to be surrounded in a physical space with other people and experience something new that is unfamiliar. You know, uh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a communal experience, but it allows us to escape a little bit at the same time, I think.
Mhm.
Um, can you tell me a little bit about your Multiverse series? Is there a particular favorite iteration in this series?
Yeah, Multiverse Series. Um, it started as a sculptural study again, with similar to a lot of my work. But at that moment, this is in 2017, I was doing this artist residency at Pier 9. Autodesk created this amazing digital fabrication workshop, basically, and they had this amazing artist residency program. And I was super lucky to be there during my grad studies, and I was working on my graduation project. I was interested in the idea of creating physical sculptures with 3D printing and putting those sculptures in virtual space by using, different sensors. And this was sort of exploring a new way of creating a virtual reality experience in between, physical and digital space by using these sculptural forms. So I was doing that project, and for that, I created a lot of different sculptural ideas inspired by physics and futurism and higher dimensional geometry. So I was calling those objects transcendental objects in a way. So I was trying to visualize and create forms as if we were able to transport a four-dimensional object into a three-dimensional space. So the audiences were interacting with those objects, and those objects were becoming spaces around them. So that it started during that project, and after that project, after creating a lot of different 3D printed objects, I realized um, I'm doing all these 3D printing processes. I'm consuming all that material, waiting 80 hours for the printing process. But at the end, after the exhibition is over, what survives is the photograph images of those sculptures. And that's what I'm able to share basically online or, as a documentation. And at the time, I was also exploring photorealistic renderings, and I realized the photorealistic rendering of a sculpture and a 3D printed photograph version of the sculpture looks almost the same. Then I thought, why not? Then why not uh, explore some large scale versions of these um, objects that can also do some impossible stuff in physical life. And I just freed my imagination, and I imagined these giant, installation ideas or kinetic sculptural ideas that is basically impossible to create in physical spaces. But it just freed my imagination. So it became this evolving process of exploring different form and installation ideas. And then something interesting happened. I opened my process of creating these sculptures to my followers online, and every day I was receiving feedback, and I was analyzing that feedback, whether it's about its form or the sound or the color. And I was responding to that feedback. So it just became this open source creation process, which was really interesting for me to explore. And it also allowed me to create this, um, uh, library of digital content. Then I was able to exhibit those different pieces in different settings, or license them, or create larger scale versions in real life with large displays, like the renderings themselves.
So
So that
they start
the
as
process was really
sculptures.
interesting.
These they started as actual forms that you would 3D print, and a lot of them are sort of alien almost looking. I'm looking at some of them right now. And then they moved to a digital version, which was screen based, right? So is that the transition? I'm
Yeah,
trying to make this clear.
it is correct. Yeah.
And then eventually you made them so big that they couldn't actually be installed. So they're
Yeah.
like huge. I mean, I'm looking at one of these pictures. It's the Metafold, I think it's called. And it looks like a giant, like the person in it is the size of an ant here. And the sculpture itself looks like it's like 4 or 5 stories tall. And so that's a rendering
Right.
of a proposal for a sculpture, or is that going to actually become an actual thing at some point?
Yeah, like I said, that I was just exploring these hypothetical installation ideas. So the cool thing about it was, that's when I realized, while I was making these 3D printed sculptures, basically because I was thinking about the size, I was thinking about the material I'm going to consume. So there's a cost coming with that, and time,
Sure.
you know, or like any architectural projects, an architect should think about how much this is going to cost, what kind of materials I'm going to use. Are we going to be able to hold this, uh, together in physical form? But I just freed my imagination and came up with these impossible, maybe, ideas to realize. But I didn't have any limits. So in digital world, I was able to create all these different ideas. But the cool thing about it, it inspired different people. And then I received some, either commission work. Hey, we have this 60 feet tall LED screen. Why not? Uh, let's just make one of these, multiverse sculptures in that screen, as if it looks like this physical installation, in that scale. So
Did you say
it was just
60 feet tall?
yeah,
Yeah. Wow. That's huge. Where was that?
yeah.
Where did that take place?
This is in MGM, National Harbor, nearby Washington. They had this huge LED screen over there, and I collaborated with Obscure Digital, and it just became the images and animations from Multiverse Series became a part of the permanent display over there.
What was it like to see your work at that scale after you started off with these 3D prints? To actually see it become a
Yeah,
giant 60-foot tall sculpture.
yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, because you first imagine something, then you hold it in your hand, and then you just imagine it bigger, and it's actually impossible to make that in real life, but with the help of these, enormous screens or projections, they can actually look like real. So it was just fascinating
Do you
to
is there ever a
look at those.
translation there that feels awkward to you? Like, do you ever render something and it looks really beautiful on a small screen, and then when you project it out or when you put it on a big 60-foot tall display, it doesn't look how you wanted it to?
I mean, it usually looks much better. you know, it's the other way around, because our screens are quite small usually, but when you look at, because there's a different light power coming out with these, either high-res projectors, laser projectors, or LED screens. So everything usually looks much more impressive on that scale.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm sure the colors are richer too. And
Exactly,
How do
exactly.
people react to your work? Like, are you going for a very specific reaction? Do you want people just to be in awe of it? Do you want them to think deeper about some of these scientific concepts?
Yeah, I mean, usually I feel like in that big scale, the works usually becomes very meditative and hypnotic, and I definitely want to take audiences to that more meditative spaces, so they can just relax and you know give themselves to the experience and just forget themselves for a while experiencing that. And especially with these large scale installations and dome experiences, I'm able to do that. And th- I mean, that makes me very happy to be able to, relax people and get them out of their minds for a while and just relax and lose themselves in these immersive spaces.
Yeah, that makes sense. Can you tell us a little bit about your latest project, Numenon?
Yeah. So Numenon is currently on display in Zero Space in New York. Zero Space is an immersive digital art museum located in Manhattan, nearby Penn Station, and it's a giant 25,000 square feet space that has multiple installations, large scale installations, um, with domes and projection experiences and light installations and different interactive media. And I'm one of the artists that is currently exhibiting there. And I had this big wall. I guess it's like 40, 50 feet wide wall they gave me, and they just said, "Do whatever you want," And
That's pretty good.
yeah, it was a great setting because I knew that, okay, I'm creating this experience. It's going to be there, for a year. And they created this 1 hour narrative. There are actors in the space and they guide you through this narrative. So I just wanted to create a compelling piece and space for that. So I went through my work and I basically proposed them something like a semi retrospective work that is specifically created for that site. So it is actually a combination of my different audiovisual pieces. It has Morphogenesis. It has parts from Multiverse Series and a different type of installation work I did. I basically put all those works together with a new sound design I made. It's nearly 20-minute long. So it was really cool to combine all those pieces under this Numenon concept, because I always felt like I'm creating something with my pieces. I always tend to create something transcendental, and Numenon in Kantian philosophy means something we can't perceive with our senses. So it is beyond. It's something that is in. It is in itself. So it is the contrast. It's the opposite of what is phenomenal in our world. So I always felt my work and those experiences are related to something beyond. So I combine all those pieces. We use two powerful laser projectors, and I also collaborated with Gabriel Shama, who is a Oakland-based sculptor. He creates these beautiful laser-cut sculptures, and he had one of his pieces, a very large sculptural piece, at the center of that piece. So when we combine all these different elements, sound design, different audiovisual pieces, which has this transcendental feeling with it, and his esoteric looking, beautiful sacred geometry sculpture. It just became something like a shrine, at the center of that space in Zero Space. And we have, a nice seating area in front of that, and I saw audiences are just laying down and watching the experience for a long time in a very peaceful way. So I'm very happy about the result. And also, beside the museum part of Zero Space, they're also using that space where I have the installation for musical performances or sometimes yoga practices. So it also becomes this virtual stage in a way for those kind of performances and exercises, and it just makes me happy to be a part of that, to accompany those experiences as well.
Yeah, looking at Numenon, it almost seems like a spiritual piece. Like it looks sort of like the window of a cathedral, in sort of in
Yeah,
like a sci-fi movie way. Do you see an overlap between sort of a spiritual practice and your work? I mean, you mentioned that people even are doing yoga in front of your work at times. I'm curious about
yeah.
that connection.
I mean, I'm so. I mean, this is also, it just emerged in that way. I didn't specifically created that piece for people to have yoga in front of it, or have musical performances, but I'm glad that it holds that sort of um, emotion or space for those experiences to happen. So I'm glad it somehow became that sort of thing.
And I'm curious about the design choices here too. It seems like the palette is primarily sort of black and white. There's a little bit of earth tones in there. Can you describe and maybe tell us about that decision to go with a very stark contrast black and white image?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few reasons for that. So there's one technical aspect, and there's one more, personal, artistic choice. In the technical aspect, um, the black and white gives us the best contrast with, projected images. So shadow illusions and light illusions are working much better when it's in black and white. And also, I wanted to combine all these different pieces with the same color palette, so it just made it easier for me to equalize, all these different pieces in one piece. And also, the artistic choice is probably coming from my, personal dreams or uh, hypnagogic states where I experienced this, weird experiences between sleep and a, a waking mind, somewhere in between.
Hmm.
So those experiences I realized are usually happening more in monochrome in my experience.
Huh.
So I just wanted to create that dream space kind of feeling. But by the end of the experience, I also introduce more golden colors. That's also something that I experienced in my dreams. Actually, there was this very interesting dream I had several years ago. I also experienced a lot of like lucid dreaming, lucid dreams.
Hmm.
Where
Sure.
where I realize, oh, I'm in a dream right now. I can do whatever I want. And in one of those dreams, when I was in a temple, and I realized, okay, I'm in a dream. What am I going to do right now? And I just sat there and began to meditate. And then everything became this golden color, and very much like the end of the experience that I try to make in Numenon. So it was really inspiring for me. It was a very rewarding moment in that dream when I chose to meditate. Everything just became a golden light, and it was a very significant dream that I had. I guess that informed me to build this experience from monochrome to that golden state.
And do you dream in sort of this geometric patterns and shapes as well? I mean, it'd be interesting. You said
Uh,
you sometimes dream in monochrome, but I'm
I
curious if you also have these
yeah.
grids and shapes in your dreams.
To be honest, a lot of my work is inspired by my dreams, especially, for instance, in Multiverse Series 2. And this is not happening at that moment. I see something and I try to reproduce it the next morning, but I had these significant dreams years ago, from these works, but I sometimes I just see a sculptural form, but in a very much like Multiverse Series in a museum setting, and I have this kinetic sculpture floating in the air, and making all these impossible weird stuff. And when I'm dreaming, and I'm very aware that I'm such a lucky guy. This is such an inspiring scene right now.
You're very thankful in your dreams to be
Yeah,
gifted with this beautiful imagery.
definitely. I'm very appreciative, when it's happening. So I feel like I'm just maybe lucky, or I don't know where these ideas are coming from, but
You're
they're
lucky. I mean, my
they're
dreams are
inspiring.
always just horrible things burning down. So
That happens to me as well.
I'm
But
curious. Sorry, go ahead.
every now and then I see these, inspiring art ideas.
Oh, it's interesting. It's interesting that you're then constructing these either digitally or physically, and we can actually sort of walk into your dreams. I mean, it makes sense with your fascination about immersion. I'm
Yeah,
curious if students or beginning artists want to get more into projection mapping. Are there certain tools you should recommend that they learn, or experiences that they should go forward with, or what would be the advice you'd give somebody who's just starting out with this kind of work?
yeah. I mean, they can just start to play with light, and with a simple projector, they're becoming more and more affordable. So even if they're not doing anything with the mapping part of it, they can still create really cool stuff with using the projector as a light source in spaces. It just creates, even if you just project a white image, it creates all these sorts of shadows and lighting up the room in a different way. So it's fun to really play with that, not just as a screen, but as a light source. And then I personally use this software called MedMapper.
Hmm.
It's super easy, and it's really fun to be able to just project your images on any surface, any irregular surface, and just fit that exactly to that geometry. It's really fun. You can also play with program lights, and LED strips and stuff like that with MedMapper too. So it's super easy. Um, there are also, I believe, free softwares that they can find online for projection mapping. Touch Designer, a software that I don't really use that often, but I have the license for for several of my installations. It is a super powerful software. A lot of professionals are using for large scale projects. They can look up to that online. There are enormous tutorials online for Touch Designer. It's super popular. So those would be my two suggestions.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I use both of those for different installations. And what about in terms of content creation? Are you doing most of your 3D rendering in like Blender or Maya or?
Yeah. Um, I mean, my main software is usually Cinema 4D.
Oh, okay.
It's a very powerful motion graphics software, and yeah, and I use Octane rendering for those realistic sculptural renderings.
That's great. Yeah, that'll help a lot of people. People always ask about sort of the programs behind the artwork too, so I think it's useful.
Yeah.
Before we go, I want to. We have a sort of a tradition here on State of the Art of doing rapid fire questions that aren't even necessarily about your work. So I'm
Mhm.
going to throw some quick questions at you. Just the first thing that pops in your mind. Don't overthink it. They're kind of silly questions. Does it sound good?
Okay,
All
sure.
right. So first one, you do a lot of work about immersion. If you could step into one world of a film, which film would that be and why?
Oh, um, I mean, it will probably be Star Wars,
Why?
because yeah, becoming a Jedi using a lightsaber seems very cool to me always.
All right, fair enough. If you could morph into one animal, what would it be and why?
I definitely want to fly, so some sort of bird would be great because I want to have that bird's eye view.
That makes sense. So you can be inside the top of the dome. Uh,
Exactly.
what is the most important file currently on your computer?
Uh, it's my keynote for my talks. I'm backing that file up always because I'm really afraid to lose it.
And are you giving a lot of talks these days too?
Not currently, but last year was more busy with talks. This year is more like hibernating for new ideas for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. You got to go back and make some more work probably at some point, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What's one piece of technology you wish existed that currently doesn't?
Uh, I mean, in the artistic sense,
Well,
holograms would be great. I really wish I had holograms so I could create these 3D pieces. But teleportation would come really handy.
where would
Otherwise,
you teleport to?
um, just why
No,
you
where? Like,
asked or
where is there a
where?
specific place you'd want to teleport to?
I mean, it would be just great to just not wait in lines, in airports and remove your shoes and all that stuff. It just makes me very stressed.
So you want teleportation so you don't have to take off your shoes so much? That's the
Exactly. Yeah.
that makes sense. All right, John, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can we find your work for people to go see online? We're going to post a lot of images and videos of your work on our social media, which is state of the art. But where can they find your work as well?
So it's hard to type my name, but I'm sure they can Google it. If they can read it on the podcast page.
Sure.
And I have my own website, and I use Instagram pretty often. I'm posting about my work and my progress. So
And they can
my
give you
website.
feedback on Instagram, so it's perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I really care about that.
Great. Well, thank you again for joining us. And I
Thank
hope
you
that you
so much for inviting me, Gabe.
yeah, stay safe and healthy out there. And just a reminder to everybody to stay inside. And now's a good time to look up some new artists. So be sure to go check out John's work, and we'll post a link to his site as well. And take a listen to some of the previous episodes as well if you haven't heard them. We'll be back next week. See you then. Thanks for listening to another episode of State of the Art. I'm Gabe BC. You can always follow me at Gabe BC. If you have any ideas or suggestions or comments you want to relay to us, you can send me an email at gabe@thestateoftheart.org. We're happy to read some questions on the air or communicate directly with you through social media at State of the Art on Twitter and Instagram. State of the Art is an @art production originally created by Ethan Appleby. Weston Stevens is our audio engineer extraordinaire, and Vanessa Wilson is our producer. And I hope that they're all doing well. And I've been communicating with them a little bit, and they seem like they're safe and healthy. And I hope our audience is also doing well and staying indoors and being safe. So we'll talk to you again next week. Thanks.